Hey guys, welcome back to Kalei Plants, and for today's video, we're gonna be comparing the succulents that you're seeing here. Yes, so we're gonna be comparing Echeverias, Sedums, Graptopetalums, and Pachyphytums. Now, these are the most common genera that you might find if you're looking for succulents. So these ones are the ones that are most usually collected. So I just wanted to highlight the differences of these plants in this video. But before we continue on with the video, please make sure to hit the like down below and also to subscribe to this channel here at Kalei Plants. We always try to post informative videos about succulents. So if you really like succulents, then this is the channel for you. Now, just to give you an overview on what we're gonna be talking about in this video, we're gonna be comparing these succulents by their origin, by their name, by their appearance, and their growing habits. And finally, towards the end of this video, we're going to be comparing the differences that these plants needs when it comes to caring for them. So the first we're going to be talking about with these succulents is their origin. So with the Echeverias, they usually come from Mexico and South America. So there are a lot of Echeverias in Mexico, South America, and usually they are found growing in between rocks or in between nooks and crannies or on high slopes. So they could be growing in between the rocks. Okay, I've said the rocks too many times. And their rosette shapes makes them very suitable for fitting in those nooks and crannies so that they can fill up the spaces there where they are protected from extreme sun. So that's where you usually find Echeverias. Now, some other Echeverias will also be growing in plains or in fields. So they're not always found in rocks. Some of them can even grow in full sun. Their name, Echeveria, comes from the name of a botanical illustrator, which is Atanasio Echeveria Igodoy. So I'm not gonna pretend that I memorized that because I didn't. So that's Atanasio Echeveria Igodoy. So that botanical illustrator, he probably drew a lot of Echeverias in his time, which is why the plants are named after him. When it comes to sedums, much like the Sedum pachyphylum, now this is not a species of sedum. This is a cultivated variety. We have a species here, a Craigiae and a Trelliaceae, right here. So these plants come from Siberia, from Europe, from Asia, from America, and also from Mexico. So compared to our Echeveria and also compared to our other thicker leaf varieties, sedums are much more widespread all over the world. And also there are very different type of sedums which may not be succulent. So some sedums are not actually grown for their succulent leaves, but also they are grown for their flowers. So there are certain varieties of sedums like that. And sedums compared to Echeverias, which are usually found as low-growing succulents, sedums are more upright and they tend to grow beside rocks, which is why they are called sedums, because the word sedum comes from the Latin word sedere, which means to sit. So they usually they're looking like they sit on rocks. So that's how they're usually found in the wild. When it comes to Graptopetalums and to Pachyphytums, they are usually found in Mexico and also in South America. So they're pretty much found nearby these plants, nearby Echeverias, and also probably nearby sedums. But what I found out when I was researching about them is that Pachyphytums are much more exclusively found in Mexico and no longer in other parts of South America. Now, Graptopetalums, on the other hand, they are much more widespread, so they can be found in different places in South America. When it comes to naming them, Graptopetalums are named for their flowers because grapto means marked and petalum means petals. So Graptopetalums, when they bloom, they have these marked petals which distinguishes them from other succulents, and which is why they are called Graptopetalums. Now, Graptopetalums can also be called leather petals in some countries. For Pachyphytums, their name Pachy, which means fat, and Phytum, plant, so they are much more known as fat plants. And here in the Philippines, Pachyphytums are also often referred as moonstones because they look like moon. They look like the moon and they look like stones. And actually in some other countries, they can also be referred to as living stones, which is another word or another name given also to lithops. But Pachyphytums can also be called living stones because they look like stones that are alive. Yes. Also, another thing I forgot about Echeveria, they can also be called as Mexican hen and chicks, which is another name for sempervivums, but they are very different plants. They have different genus, the sempervivums. I think I have a sempervivum. Okay, over there. So I'll just show you a picture of sempervivum. Sempervivum also tends to clump, much like our Echeveria. So our Echeveria plants, the low-growing ones, they tend to form clumps as they grow. But there are also taller varieties of Echeveria like this one, which will tend to grow as little bushes. So they will produce like bush-like growth. They're like bushes, while some other will stay low and stay on the ground and stay small. Even if they're growing big, even if they grow a lot, they will still stay small and compact, which is a nice thing for some Echeverias because some other people don't have a lot of space to grow plants, and Echeverias, the low growing ones, they can be very good for that. But also there are Echeverias which grows big. So there are Echeveria gibifloras that can take up a very big size, a very big space. So there are a lot, very much a lot different varieties of Echeverias. Some also could produce glaucus farina on their leaves like this. On the Echeveria ice green, this is a Lawi hybrid. It got its farina from its Lawi parents, most probably. Some other will not have that thick of a farina like this one, and some others will really won't have any farina at all. So like with this Echeveria gilva, which is a hybrid of Echeveria agavoides and Echeveria elegans. So this plant doesn't have a lot of farina. So that's one way Echeverias can grow. So that's one leaf type they can have. And also some other Echeverias can have fuzzy leaves, much like this Echeveria harmsii. Okay, this is also called as ruby sleepers, but its scientific name is harmsii. So that's the appearance of Echeverias. When it comes to sedums, they tend to have a growing habit like a spiral. So you can see here at the sides of these leaves. At the top, it looks like a rosette also, but it can form a formation like a spiral like this one, like with this Pachyphylum. So the leaves will spiral downwards. So that's how sedums look. But some other will not have that much of a compact or rosette style. So these sedum craigiae have a growth habit of a much more loose spiral, not as compact as these Trelliaceae and this Pachyphylum. Now also some sedums can have glaucous leaves, much like our Echeveria right here. So with this sedum Trelliaceae, it has a lot of farina on its leaves, but some other sedum won't have that, like our sedum Pachyphylum. And also sedums, as they grow, they tend to form upright clusters or upright clumps. So they kind of grow like a little bush. That's how they grow. But some other sedums will trail downwards. So like with our sedum burrito right here. So some sedums will grow like this. They hang downwards. They are pendant, so they hang. In the wild, they're usually found in slopes, so where they can grow downwards from the top. So that's just how they grow. Okay, let me just put this back. Now when it comes to Graptopetalums, as you can see here, so this is a Graptopetalum, this, and this one. So they tend to have a clumping habit of growth. Graptopetalums are actually very fast propagators, and also they produce babies, or they produce pups on their sides very quickly and very easily. And most usually these plants will have farina on them, much like our Echeverias, but I don't think that I found Graptopetalums which are fuzzy or which are hairy, which sedums can be hairy sometimes, and Echeverias, there are varieties that can be hairy, but Graptopetalums, they are usually on the more thick leaf and not hairy type. Okay, so they're not the hairy type, and they can produce farina if they're given more sun, but with less sun they can produce less farina. And as they grow, they can produce little clumps that go up, and as it goes, it can hang down like this one, like our Graptopetalum Mendozae. So it hangs down. This Myrinae, I expect it to be hanging down also. And this ghost plant, this Paraguayense, as it grows, it will also tend to go up and then hang down. So that's just how the plant grows. And also with the Amethystinum, I've seen Graptopetalum amethystinums which are hanging from a hanging basket. So that's just one way they can grow. And also you don't have to worry about them if they're growing downwards, because that can also be a natural way for them to grow. Now moving on with the Pachyphytums, they are usually characterized with their very thick leaves, much like this Pachyphytum oviferum, and also with this compactum. So because they are called thick plants, living stones, they're usually found with very thick leaves. Now the unique thing about Pachyphytums is when it grows, some of the varieties in it can produce like this faceted look on their leaves, much like with this compactum. Now the Pachyphytum virid and also another type of Pachyphytum could have that look on its leaves because it brushes off the farina on it, so it looks like a gem, like a jewel. So that's just a unique thing about these thick Pachyphytums. But much like the Graptopetalums, they can only have leaves which are farina or leaves that don't have farina. Some varieties will not have less farina, and also they tend to grow upright. So unlike our Graptopetalums, which can trail down, and our sedums, some sedums can trail down, Pachyphytums are usually found in bushy type growth. They grow upright and they produce little clumps of babies. So that's how Pachyphytums grows as it matures. But they are usually found much more smaller compared to these other succulents, because Graptopetalums, they can produce large clumps, but Pachyphytums, because they are very slow growers, so you can usually find them in smaller clumps, or usually they are found solitary if they're not old enough. Now, when it comes to flowering, which is usually the most important way to distinguish a plant, actually, people who are identifying plants, they usually identify them by their flowers. So if a plant hasn't flowered yet, or if people haven't seen the flower of the plant yet, then they will not be able to identify it yet. So with these plants, they are pretty much sure about the genus of this because they have very different flowers. Echeverias, they tend to have flower stalk or inflorescence. So the inflorescence, when you hear the word inflorescence, it means the flower, the part of the plant that is the flower as a whole. So the inflorescence will tend to grow up in a stalk, and then it will hang down like that. So it kind of grows up and then it hangs down like that. So it usually forms two stalks at the tip, which will hang down and which will have bell-shaped flowers. So that's the flowers of Echeveria, and that is very unique to their variety. Other plants in here won't have that same look of a flower. Sedums, on the other hand, their flower are much more upright and they flower outward. So they don't hang their flowers down, they flower much like upward like that. So you can see here with this Pachyphyllum, it's just starting to bloom, but you can see that the flower stalk is going up, and I expect it to bloom upwards like that. So that's the difference with sedums and echeverias, because echeverias will have that hanging style flowers. With the Graptopetalums, it tends to have much more smaller flower stalks, I believe. Now, I haven't seen this plant flowered in my care, so none of these Graptopetalums have flowered. Maybe I haven't been giving them the right condition to flower, but they tend to have flower as I've seen online. They flower much more outwards and much more lower, closer to their main body compared to the sedum and compared with the echeverias. Pachyphytum flowers, on the other hand, it tends to grow up and grow out, and then it tends to hang down because the leaves and the petals on Pachyphytum, they are very thick, so they're very cute when they are flowering. It hangs down. Yeah, I haven't seen any of my Pachyphytums bloom either, but it is very different with Echeverias. I've seen the flowers of these plants online, and the flowers look also like a bell shape, but they have much more thicker leaves and petals and sepals on them compared with the Echeverias, which have thin leaves on their flower stalks. Pachyphytum blooms are very pretty, very cute, but they can also be very different compared to these other plants, which is why they are in a different genus compared with the others. So that's how we usually identify plants. That's how scientists identify plants, by their differences in their blooming. Now finally, we're gonna moving on their differences when it comes to care. Now, most of these plants you find here, you're looking at here, are full sun plants, so they grow best when they're given at least 6 hours of direct sun, or 5 to 6 hours of direct sun, and they can grow even better if they're given filtered sun for the whole day. Much like here at the greenhouse, so you can see that the plants I've got here are very compact. None of them are etiolating so far, so because they are getting the right amount of light. Also with the potting mix, it's best to use a fast draining potting mix for them, and pots, it's best to use pots that have drainage holes in them. So don't use pots that have closed that pots that are closed, which doesn't have any sort of drainage, because those pots will collect water and it will make the plant rot, make the plant mushy. So it's best also if you can get it clay pots for these plants. I usually go with clay pots if I'm not yet sure on how to care for a specific plant. So if they're always thirsty in a clay pot, then I will move them to a plastic pot. But if they are not that thirsty in a clay pot, then I will stick with the clay pot for them. So that's how I gauge my care for my succulents. Now also, when it comes to their growing seasons, the only one that is different is our Echeveria. These plants are summer growers, which means they are dormant during the winter. Actually, I've read so many times before online that Echeverias will tend to lose their leaves when it is cold enough, when it's the middle of the winter. So they will tend to drop leaves, they will lose their size. And the same goes with other succulents when it is not their growing season. So for example, with sedums, they will tend to drop leaves during the summer because they're dormant in summer and they're more active during the winter time. So to avoid that, to avoid much dormancy or stress on your plant, you can try growing them indoors where the temperature is much more regulated, because outdoors, you have to rely on the environment for the temperature, but indoors you can regulate the temperature and you can have them growing evenly all throughout the year because they are indoors, they are more protected from extreme heat and cold. But usually, if you're growing them outdoors or if you don't have an indoor space for them, you will find much more growth on Echeverias during the summer and much more growth on sedums, Graptopetalums, and Pachyphytums during the winter. Now also, you have to keep this in mind, that if it's not their growing season, you don't have to water them a lot because they will not drink up a lot of water, and also that will contribute to their dropping of leaves. So if you water Echeverias a lot during the winter, they will drop their leaves. And also if you water your sedums a lot during the summer, they will drop their leaves. So you only have to give them much more consistent watering during their growing season. So sedums, water them a lot during the winter, same with the Graptopetalums and the Pachyphytums. And also don't expect them to produce a lot of growth when it's not their growing season or when they are stressed. So Pachyphytums, you will know if they need water if they are already flappy or if their leaves are already droopy and wrinkled. Same with the Graptopetalum, if it's a wide leaf plant. If it's a wide leaf plant, you can pinch its leaves to know if it needs water. So that's how you can tell. With our smaller leafed ones, if they are no longer shiny, then you can already water them. Same with the sedums. It can also have wrinkling on its leaves if it's thirsty, or if it's no longer shiny or vibrant in color, then that probably means it needs water. With our Echeveria, you can also touch their bottom leaves to check if they are thirsty. So if the bottom leaves are not plump, then that's how you know that it already needs watering. So these plants of mine, they're still plump, so they don't need watering yet. So I'm just gonna have to wait for them to become wrinkled before I water them. So for example, this is just an example of a wrinkled plant. This is not yet an established sedum, which is why it's getting a lot of wrinkling on its leaves. Yes. Now if you're just starting with succulents and you want to collect a lot of these varieties, you will find that the one with the most variation is the sedums. There are already 500 varieties of sedums out there you can collect, so there is too many. I will not be able to collect them all. With the Echeverias, there are about 150 varieties, but because they are the most cultivated of all these varieties, Echeverias have the most cultivars, so there are about more than 1,000 different cultivars or hybrids of Echeverias. Pachyphytums, on the other hand, I've looked it up online and there are about 30 varieties of Pachyphytums, which probably included the hybrids that are purely Pachyphytum. So there are about 30 varieties, so there are less varieties of Pachyphytums. While the Graptopetalums, they have the least amount of varieties. There are about only 12 varieties of Graptopetalums, so around 12 or 15 varieties of Graptopetalums out there. So if you're one who wants to collect much less varied plants, then Graptopetalums may be the one for you. And also Graptopetalums, what I found, is the most adaptable when it comes to tropical countries, when it comes to tropical climates. Graptopetalums are actually very popular here in the Philippines. Now, when it comes to pests and problems, I would say that the sedums are the most resistant when it comes to pests and problems. Sedums are actually very vigorous growers if you give them the right amount of care that they need. They are very low maintenance and they don't need to be watered very often, and they don't have a lot of problems with pests. Same with the Graptopetalums. Now the only problem with Echeverias and with Pachyphytums, they are more of a magnet when it comes to pests compared to these other plants. But if you can give them the right amount of care that they need, you will also find that they're not very much, they don't tend to get a lot of insects very quickly. So if you neglect them, they can get insects. But what I would say, the sedums are the ones that are most resistant to pests. Now, I share a lot more information when it comes to caring for these succulents. On my channel, I have another playlist for when it comes to problems with succulents. So, if you want to know more about how to care for these plants, please make sure to subscribe down below and also to check out my other videos on the channel. There are a lot of playlists that I made in there that are specific if you need specific info about these plants, and also I've made specific videos for some other varieties that you're seeing here, so make sure to check that out on the channel. And so I think that's about it for this video. If you want to see me compare other succulents in the future, make sure to comment down below. I will try to make another video. If you really want to request a specific type of species or specific type of comparison, I will do it later on. Just comment it down below. And that's about it for this video, guys. I will see you on the next one. Bye bye.